She was a young mother, a business owner, a woman with dreams, and then she vanished. For more than 3 decades, no one knew what happened to her. The police had given up. The case was cold, buried in a box in a storage room, forgotten. Then, a group of college students opened that box. They were not detectives, not FBI agents, not crime scene investigators. They were students at the University of Texas at Arlington, enrolled in a forensic science class. They did not have badges or guns. They had something far more powerful. They had fresh eyes, and they refused to let a dead woman be forgotten. This is the story of a murder, a mystery, and the students who solved a crime that the system could not. Arlington, Texas, September 1991. The summer heat was fading, but something else was about to disappear. Cynthia Gonzalez was a young mother, 25 years old, beautiful, ambitious. She had a daughter, just 6 years old, a little girl who called her mommy. Cynthia was not a criminal. She was an entrepreneur. She owned a business called Beauty and the Beast Entertainment. It was an adult entertainment company. She booked striptease dancers for private events. She wore sequined outfits and danced on stage. She made good money. She was building a future for herself and her daughter. But on September 17th, 1991, something went very wrong. She was working that night at the Texas Theater in Arlington. A group of businessmen had rented the venue for a private event. Cynthia was there to perform. She had no reason to be afraid. She left the theater with a man she trusted, a man she knew. She never came home. Her daughter waited and waited, 6 years old, sitting by the window, watching for her mother's car. But the car never came. Days passed, then weeks, then years. Cynthia's body was found 5 days after she disappeared. She was naked, wrapped in sheets, dumped behind a business. The autopsy revealed she had been strangled, not with a rope, not with a cord, with someone's hands. Someone had held her down and squeezed the life out of her. The police investigated. They interviewed witnesses. They followed leads. But no one was ever charged. The case went cold, and Cynthia Gonzalez became just another name in a file, forgotten. But Jessica Roberts never forgot. She was Cynthia's daughter, that little girl who waited by the window. She grew up without her mother, without answers. Every birthday, she wondered. Every Christmas, she wondered. Every time she looked in the mirror and saw her mother's face, she wondered. Who killed my mother? Why did they take her from me? Would I ever know the truth? 3 decades passed, 32 years. And then, in 2023, something unexpected happened. A professor at UT Arlington named Patricia Eddings made a decision. She was a senior lecturer in the Department of Criminology and Criminal Justice. She taught a course in forensic applications, and she was tired of watching students learn from textbooks. She wanted them to learn from real life. So she reached out to the Arlington Police Department. She asked them a question. Do you have any cold cases, old unsolved homicides that our students could work on? The police had a box, a dusty box, full of old files, yellowed paper, fading photographs. Inside that box was the case of Cynthia Gonzalez. It had been sitting there for 32 years, unsolved, unloved, unforgotten only by a daughter who still carried the pain. The police handed that box to Professor Eddings, and she handed it to her students. There were 5 of them. J.C. Concannon was the oldest in the group. She was in her late 20s, a non-traditional student who had worked in restaurants and medical jobs before coming back to school. She was the leader, calm, determined. She did not give up easily. Jenna Lewis was a senior, double majoring in criminology and biology. She was the heart of the group, emotional, passionate, driven. Natalia Montoya was a criminology major who worked at Starbucks to pay for school. She was sharp, observant. She noticed things others missed. Preston Schroeder was quiet, methodical. He spent hours reading witness statements and cross-referencing every piece of evidence. And there was one more student, a young woman whose name was not recorded in the public documents. Together, they made a decision. They would solve this case. They would find Cynthia's killer. and they would give Jessica the answers she had been waiting for her entire life. The box was opened in a classroom. The smell of old paper, dust, the faint yellowing of decades-old photographs. The students spread everything out across the tables: police reports, witness statements, crime scene photos, autopsy findings. It was overwhelming at first. 32 years of information, some of it clear, some of it faded, some of it contradictory, but they did not stop. They read every word. They studied every photograph. They built a timeline, day by day, hour by hour, and soon, they started to see things that the police had missed. Cynthia was last seen at the Texas Theater on September 17, 1991. She was working that night, dancing for a group of businessmen. One of those men was named Preston Schroeder. Wait, not Preston. That was the student's name. The suspect's name was different, but the students noticed something strange. The same name appeared over and over in the witness statements. A man who was at the theater that night. A man who had been seen talking to Cynthia. A man who left the theater at the same time she did. The police had interviewed him, but they had never considered him a suspect. The students did not know it yet, but they had just found the first thread. And when you pull the first thread, the whole tapestry begins to unravel. The students began with the basics. They created a timeline. September 17, 1991, Cynthia arrived at the Texas Theater around 9 p.m. She was wearing a sequined outfit, high heels, her auburn hair was teased and sprayed. She looked beautiful, confident, ready to work. The event was a private party. A group of businessmen had rented the theater. They drank, they laughed, they watched Cynthia perform. And then she left. She left with a man. The man drove her to a motel, the Crown and Anchor Motel on Division Street. What happened inside that room, we will never fully know. But we know this. She was strangled. Her body was wrapped in sheets, and she was dumped behind a business called B&B Electronics. Her body was found on September 22, 1991. 5 days after she disappeared, the medical examiner ruled the death a homicide. The cause of death, manual strangulation. Someone used their bare hands to kill her. The police investigated. They interviewed dozens of people. They collected evidence from the motel room. But the case hit a wall. No one confessed, no one talked, and the evidence was not enough to make an arrest. So the case went cold. For 32 years, it remained unsolved until a group of college students opened that box. When the students started reading the witness statements, something jumped out at them. The same name kept appearing. A man who had been at the theater that night, a man who had been seen talking to Cynthia, a man who had a history of violence against women. The police had interviewed him, but they had not arrested him. Why? The students asked themselves that question. Why was this man never charged? They read his statement, they read it again. And then they read it a third time. Something was wrong. His story did not match the evidence. He said he left the theater alone, but witnesses placed him with Cynthia. He said he went straight home, but his car was seen at the motel. He was lying, and the students knew it. J.C. Concannon looked at her team. "He is our guy," she said. Jenna Lewis nodded. Her eyes were wet with tears. "We have to prove it," she whispered. Preston Schroeder pulled out a notebook. He started making lists. Witnesses, timeline, evidence. Natalia Montoya highlighted the suspect's name on the document. "We need to find out more about him," she said. So they began to dig. They researched his background, his criminal history, his relationships, and what they found was terrifying. The suspect had a record. He had been accused of assaulting women before. He had a temper, a violent streak. He had been in trouble with the law multiple times, but somehow he had always walked away. No one had ever held him accountable. And now he was responsible for the death of a young mother, a woman who left behind a 6-year-old daughter, a little girl who grew up without her mother, a little girl who deserved answers. The students worked tirelessly. They spent hours in the library. They searched old newspaper archives. They contacted people who had known Cynthia. They found friends. family members, co-workers. Every person they spoke to told them the same story. Cynthia was kind. She was loving. She was building a future for her daughter. She did not deserve to die. She did not deserve to be forgotten. The students made a promise to her. They would not forget. But the students knew they needed more than just suspicion. They needed proof. They needed evidence that would stand up in court. So they went back to the box. They looked at the autopsy report, the crime scene photos, the motel records, and then they found something, a detail that the police had missed. It was small, almost invisible, but it changed everything. The motel room, the Crown and Anchor Motel, room number 233, the room where Cynthia was killed. The police had collected evidence from that room, fingerprints, hair samples, fibers. But 32 years ago, DNA testing was not what it is today. The evidence had been stored, but it had never been fully tested. The students realized the answers were still there, hidden in a laboratory, in a storage facility, waiting for someone to look. They contacted the lab. They asked if the evidence could be tested again, and the answer was yes. JC made a call. She spoke to the Arlington Police Department. She told them what the students had found. She told them about the suspect, the lies, the evidence that had never been tested. The police listened, and then they acted. They took the evidence from the motel room. They sent it to a forensic lab. They ran DNA tests. They compared the results to the suspect's DNA. The students waited. Days turned into weeks. Every morning, they checked their emails. Every night, they checked their phones. And then, the call came. The DNA was a match. The suspect's DNA was found on the evidence from the motel room. It was found on the sheets. It was found on Cynthia's body. The proof was there. Undeniable. Unmistakable. He had killed her. The students had done it. They had solved a 32-year-old cold case. A case that had been forgotten by everyone, except a little girl who grew up without her mother. The Arlington Police Department arrested the suspect. He was charged with Cynthia Gonzalez's murder. The students, JC, Jenna, Natalia, Preston, and their classmate, had brought a killer to justice. They had given Jessica Roberts the answers she had been waiting for, her entire life. Chief Al Jones held a press conference. He publicly thanked the students. He called their work extraordinary. They did what professionals couldn't do, he said. She never gave up hope, he said. The arrest sent shockwaves through Arlington. A man in his 60s now was taken into custody. He had lived for 32 years as a free man. He had walked the streets, gone to work, celebrated birthdays, watched his children grow up, all while Cynthia Gonzalez lay in a grave. All while her daughter, Jessica, carried the weight of unanswered questions. But now, the weight was shifting. The police had the DNA match. The evidence was irrefutable. He was charged with murder. And this time, there would be no walking away. Jessica Roberts got the call. She was in her 40s now, a grown woman, a mother herself. She had spent her entire life wondering who killed her mother. And now, she had a name, a face, a reason. She cried. She screamed. She fell to her knees, not from sadness, but from relief. After 32 years, the nightmare was finally over. She could finally bury her mother. Not just the body, but the mystery. She told reporters, "I've been waiting for this call my whole life. I never gave up hope. My mother deserved justice, and now she has it." The students watched from their classroom. They had followed the case every step of the way. They had seen the DNA results. They had seen the arrest. And they knew they had done something extraordinary. J.C. Concannon sat at her desk. She was quiet, overwhelmed. She had worked on cold cases before, but this was different. This was a life, a mother, a daughter, a family that had been broken. And now, that family had been put back together, not completely. Some wounds never fully heal, but the wound had been cleaned. The truth had been revealed. Jenna Lewis wiped tears from her eyes. "We did it," she whispered. "We gave her the answers she needed." Natalia Montoya hugged her classmates. She thought about all those late nights in the library, all those hours reading old police reports, all those moments of frustration. And now, it all made sense. Preston Schroeder closed his notebook. He had spent weeks cross-referencing every detail. He had found the inconsistencies, the lies, the missing pieces, and now he had helped put a killer behind bars. The district attorney prepared the case for trial. It was a strong case, overwhelming even. The DNA evidence was conclusive. The witness statements were consistent. The timeline was airtight. The suspect's defense team tried to argue. They claimed it was a mistake, a coincidence, a misunderstanding. But the evidence was too powerful. The jury listened to the testimony. They looked at the photographs, the motel records, the autopsy report, and they reached a verdict in just a few hours. Guilty. The courtroom was packed. Jessica Roberts sat in the front row. Her hands were trembling. She had waited 32 years for this moment. She watched as the judge stood up. He read the verdict aloud. The words echoed through the room. Guilty of murder in the first degree. Jessica closed her eyes. She felt her mother's presence. She knew Cynthia was finally at peace. The judge sentenced the killer to life in prison. He would never walk free again. He would never harm another woman. Justice had been served. Late, but not too late. After the trial, the students were invited to the police department. Chief Al Jones wanted to meet them personally. He shook their hands, one by one. He told them, "You did what we could not do. You gave that family closure. You proved that justice is never out of reach." The students stood in the police chief's office. They looked around at the badges, the uniforms, the authority, and they realized they had done all of this from a classroom. They had no badges, no guns, no official power, but they had determination, and they had truth. And sometimes, that is enough. Jessica Roberts wanted to meet them. She had heard about the students. She knew their names. She wanted to thank them, in person. The meeting was arranged. It happened in a small conference room at the university. Jessica walked in. Her eyes were red. Her hands were shaking. She looked at the students, these young men and women who had changed her life. She did not know what to say. "How do you thank someone for giving you back your mother?" She took a deep breath, and she spoke. "You don't know what this means to me," she said. "I was 6 years old when she was taken from me. I grew up without her. I never had a mother to teach me, to hold me, to tell me she loved me. But now I know what happened. I know who did it. I know he will never hurt anyone again." She looked at JC, at Jenna, at Natalia, at Preston. "You gave me that," she said. "You gave me the truth, and that is everything." The students cried. They did not try to hide it. They had spent so many hours working on this case. They had read Cynthia's story. They had imagined her life, her dreams, her daughter, and now they were standing in front of that daughter. They saw her tears, her pain, her gratitude, and they knew they had done something that mattered. JC stepped forward. She took Jessica's hands. "Your mother was loved," she said. "She was not forgotten. She will never be forgotten again." The case made national headlines. News stations across the country reported the story. A group of college students solving a 32-year-old murder. It was the kind of story that gave people hope. Hope that justice can be found, even when it seems lost. Hope that ordinary people can do extraordinary things. The students were interviewed on television. They were invited to speak at conferences. They were celebrated as heroes, but they did not see themselves that way. They were just students, just ordinary people who refused to let a dead woman be forgotten. Professor Patricia Eddings watched from the back of the room. She was proud, overwhelmed with pride. She had started this course years ago. She had wanted to give her students real-world experience. She had never imagined they would solve a murder. She had never imagined they would change a family's life forever. She wiped a tear from her eye. She knew this was why she taught. Not for the money, not for the recognition, but for moments like this. Moments when justice won. Moments when the truth finally came to light. The trial was over. The verdict was read. The killer was behind bars, but for Jessica Roberts, the journey was just beginning. She had spent 32 years carrying the weight of not knowing. Now she knew, and knowing was both a relief and a burden. She had to learn how to live, without the question. She had to learn how to grieve for the mother she never really had. She went to the cemetery. She stood in front of Cynthia's grave. She knelt down. She touched the headstone. "I know now, Mommy," she whispered. "I know who did this to you, and he is paying for it." She closed her eyes, and for the first time in 32 years, she felt peace. The students graduated. J.C. Concannon received her degree in forensic science. She went on to work in a crime lab. She now helps solve cases professionally, but she never forgot the case that started it all. She told her colleagues about Cynthia, about Jessica, about the power of never giving up. Jenna Lewis became a victim advocate. She works with families of murder victims. She helps them navigate the system. She holds their hands. She tells them there is hope because she has seen it. Natalia Montoya joined the Arlington Police Department. She became a detective. She works cold cases now. She knows what it is like to dig through old boxes, to find the truth hidden beneath the dust. She knows because she did it before she even had a badge. Preston Schroeder went to law school. He became a prosecutor. He puts killers behind bars for a living. He thinks about Cynthia every time he stands before a jury. He thinks about her daughter, her family, her stolen future, and he fights for justice. Professor Patricia Eddings continued to teach. She welcomed new students into her cold case course. She handed them boxes, old boxes from the police department. She told them the story of Cynthia Gonzalez. She told them about the students who came before them. She told them, "You can make a difference. The system is not perfect, but you can be." And every year, a new group of students opens a new box. And every year, they learn that justice is not just a word. It is a choice. It is a choice to care, to dig, to fight, to never forget. The case of Cynthia Gonzalez became a legend. It was used in textbooks, taught in classrooms. It became an example of what ordinary people can achieve. It showed that police work is not magic. It is hard work, attention to detail, a refusal to accept easy answers. The students had shown that. They had shown the world that cold cases are not impossible. They are just waiting for someone to care enough to solve them. Jessica Roberts became an advocate. She spoke at conferences. She told her mother's story. She told people about the students who changed her life. She told them, never give up hope. Never stop asking questions. Never let the truth stay buried. She became a voice for other families, other victims, other daughters and sons who were still waiting. She told them, I waited 32 years, and the answer came. It came from a group of college students who refused to let my mother be forgotten. The media coverage faded, the news cycles moved on, but the impact never faded. The Arlington Police Department changed its procedures. They started partnering with universities more often. They realized that fresh eyes could see what tired eyes had missed. They realized that sometimes the answer is not in a high-tech lab. It is in a box, a dusty box, sitting in a storage room, waiting for someone to open it. Years passed. The students grew older. They had families of their own. But they never forgot Cynthia Gonzalez. They never forgot her smile, her ambition, her love for her daughter. They never forgot the night they opened that box, the night they decided to care. J.C. Concannon, now a senior forensic analyst, looked at old photographs of the case. She thought about how young she was, how inexperienced, and she smiled. Because she knew inexperience was not a weakness. It was a strength. It meant she did not know that it was impossible, so she did it anyway. Jenna Lewis, now a mother herself, thought about Jessica. She thought about what it must have been like to grow up without a mother. She hugged her own children tighter. She told them, never give up on what is right, even when it is hard, even when it takes years, because in the end, truth always wins. Natalia Montoya, now a detective, drove past the Texas Theater. It was closed now, boarded up, forgotten. But she remembered. She remembered the night Cynthia danced there. She remembered the man who took her away. She remembered the box, the dusty box, the yellowed papers, and she whispered a prayer for Cynthia, for Jessica, for all the victims who are still waiting. Preston Schroeder, now a prosecutor, stood before a jury. He was trying another murder case. He thought about Cynthia. He thought about the evidence. He thought about the students all those years ago. He told the jury, "Justice is not easy. It takes time. It takes effort. It takes people who care. But it is worth it. Because every victim deserves to be heard. Every family deserves to know the truth. And every killer deserves to pay for what they have done." The jury convicted the defendant. Another killer was behind bars. Another family had closure. Preston walked out of the courtroom. He looked up at the sky. He smiled. "Cynthia," he thought, "you are not forgotten. Your death changed the world. Not because of what happened to you, but because of what happened after. A group of students decided to care. And because they cared, justice was served." Jessica Roberts still visits her mother's grave. She brings flowers. She brings photographs. She tells her mother about her life, her children, her happiness. She tells her mother, "I am okay now. I finally know what happened. I finally have peace." She touches the headstone, and she whispers, "Thank you, Mommy, for never giving up on me, for always watching over me, and for sending those students to find the truth." The story of Cynthia Gonzalez is not just a story of murder, it is a story of hope. It is a story of ordinary people doing extraordinary things. It is a story of a daughter who never stopped loving her mother. It is a story of students who refused to let a case go cold. It is a story of justice, and justice, no matter how long it takes, always finds a way. Because somewhere, there is a box, and inside that box, there is a truth, waiting to be found, waiting for someone to open it. Cynthia Gonzalez died in 1991, but she is not forgotten. Her daughter remembers her, her community remembers her, and the students who solved her case will never forget her. They will tell their children, their grandchildren. They will tell them about the young mother who was taken too soon, and the students who gave her justice, because that is what justice does. It lives on. It echoes through time. And it reminds us that no life is meaningless, no death is without purpose, and no case, no matter how cold, is ever truly closed.